attitude is huge. It is the case that in an economy like this one, where we are creating way more technology jobs than universities are creating so-called qualified individuals, that's decreasingly a reality, right? You're more likely to, you know, get yourself through 340 and then job out for 75K. You know, spoiler alert, right? That can happen. But so there is that little bit of an exception, but I think the point is still really a good one. Yeah.
So this ring, I don't know if you've seen Apollo 13. They log
Yeah,
in
back in the
and
day.
all the things on the table, and they're like, "This is what we have. We need to connect this with this."
Or The Martian.
Or The Martian, which is a whole movie of that.
Bring Matt Damon home.
So
Again.
it kind of illustrates the tools they have.
Yeah.
There was a group of smart people that were willing to work together,
Yeah.
and they made it work.
Yeah. And I love movies where the nerds are the heroes, right? And we're all just like, yes, they will find love.
So you can actually really see this in any team aspect. So like even in sports, you know, you can have a perfect defensive scheme, perfect calling the right plays, but if players aren't the right players, they're not
Right.
making it work.
If that corner can't keep up with the wide receiver, he's still wide open, no matter how the play calling went. That was a reference to a sport known among our people as football. Some of these guys.
When you hear the term smart, you think of someone who knows a lot. But just because there can be people who know a lot that don't get a lot of work done. And there can be people who don't know a lot that learn a lot and get a lot more work done because they're willing to learn and they're willing to admit that what they don't know and learn.
It's back to the orders of ignorance again. And really what's your name? You were talking about really relates to the orders of ignorance. The more cookie cutter the work, the less innovation you require of the individual, the less sort of creative thinking. And the more out there innovating you're going to be doing, the more those people have to be able to manage their own ignorance and deal in the ambiguity. I think it kind of relates to what I really liked about your comment. Let's go to number 3. The only rule I have in management is to ensure I have good people. I think that's really dumb. I just want to say it. If that's literally the only rule you have, even good people, I mean, imagine if you're like, whatever, so Nick Saban, Alabama football, right? That's a dynasty. I don't think his whole attitude is the only rule I have is recruit the best athletes. I think it's more complex than that. That's all I'm saying. Real good people, and then I grow good people. Okay, that's 2 rules. You're lying to us. And then I provide an environment in which good people can produce. So again, the hard part is what that means in practice. What does that mean in terms of your policy that you put in place? What does that mean in terms of how you pay people, or how you deal with time off, or how you deal with deadlines, or how you deal with pressure, right? How you deal with process, and how you deal with tools and this kind of stuff. It's not as simple as bring the best people. But I think that's critical. And it's actually even more interesting in a sense because it's a harder problem when you can't get good people, right? When you're not, what's the hottest company right now? That everybody wants to get to this company, and you know that it's not going to be you, that kind of hard company, right? I'm trying to make a point. Some of you will make it. But a lot of you are just like, oh, if only I could. What's that company? Google? Is it still Google? Have they fallen off the top spot yet?
They have. Airbnb was voted.
Airbnb?
Best place to work.
That's okay. We're gonna vote for Airbnb. Who else shows up in your Blizzard? Really? Who else? Who else shows up? Apple? Is Apple still up there? Okay. Here's a trick question. Microsoft? Murmur. They used to be. I had a chance to go to Microsoft in 1988. I wouldn't be here right now if I had done that. I just want to tell you. As an engineer at Microsoft in 1988, I would be really, really wealthy right now. But I didn't want to go because of the ethic of the company and the work ethic, the lifestyle. A lot of single guys working, 8 days a week kind of thing. Shout out to the Beatles, but you know what I mean? But could have done, but so who else? Facebook? Is Facebook up there? Do they recruit here? Who else? I mean, come on, who else is at the upper echelon?
SpaceX.
Well, there's only
SpaceX,
so many
really?
things to be in the upper echelon, right?
What's that?
There's only so many things to be in the upper echelon,
Have we
right?
exhausted the cardinality of excellent companies? I don't know. Okay. So my point is, when you go to, okay, who's kind of in the blah blah range in the middle? Say it loud, what was it? Qualtrics? I mean, some of you work at these places, okay, we're not trying to insult anybody, but there's a recruiting issue, right? There's an issue of who gets to recruit who, at what level. There is a pecking order that exists, and I've watched it. I've watched companies rise, I've watched them fall, and you gotta ask yourself, if you're gonna go to certain companies, what is because we can talk about all we want about how amazing it is to work for Elon Musk, or go to work for Tesla or something, but guess what? Everything's not Tesla, and everything's not Apple. And what if it is Qualtrics? I don't even know. Actually, my son-in-law used to work for Qualtrics. I have some opinions. But I'm just saying, what else is local? Ancestry, I don't know, what else, right? There are dynamics there that you have to come to grips with and understand how it fits in the grand scheme.
I mean, from the standpoint, right, of the vice president, I think the thought would be, well, if I get good people, I don't need to do nearly as much as I otherwise would need to, right? A set of good employees are going to work well together. They're going to understand their own roles within the company, and they should be able to communicate and figure a lot of things out that maybe a manager over some less talented or qualified individuals might have to do.
Right.
At the same time, I think the second point about growing good people is a really important one, right? As a manager, I think part of your job is to essentially come up with somebody within your own organization that can replace you where you are, and be able to train somebody up to that position.
Yeah.
And so that really reflects a lot more on you as a manager than on the people that you hire.
That's right. Even the best companies have structure, they have process, they have organization, there are org charts, there's responsibilities, there's that kind of division of labor at the very, very best companies. One of my former grad students is a development manager at Google, has been there now for coming on 10 years, doing really, really well financially, but there are issues. Whenever he comes out here to recruit, we always wind up having breakfast at least one of those days, and then he just always regales me with the tales of woe when the toxic hero, even at Google, because they were so smart, they could answer that stupid puzzle-solving interview question and prove themselves to be a little chess master, and then they go off and they don't know how to deal with people, right? And you get a lot of that at Google, frankly, even though it's a fantastic company that is no longer entirely dedicated to non-evil. So, I mean, life pivots, stuff pivots. It's not as pure as it used to be. All right, let's do a couple other things. So, Bill Curtis said this. This one's really important, and I want you to chew on this for the next 5 minutes or so. Bill Curtis said this: enormous variability in the ability of different people to perform programming tasks. There's been a lot of research. Some of this it's really, really hard to characterize this, and I won't go into the details and the nuance of how you actually show this empirically, okay, in research. What do you think of this number? Studies show a variance in programmer ability as high as 50 to 1. Okay? So let's put that into practice. There's like 22, 23 work days in an average month. This means that the ratio from, say, the best developer that you might pull from somewhere and the worst developer spends 2 months trying to do something that this one developer does in a single day. Is that in any way reasonable? Did anybody reject that out of hand and just say, that's Dr. K, it's so ridiculous? Your so-called lecture stories, they cannot be true. What do you think? Or does that resonate and just go, yeah, I've seen that.
I would say that it's an extreme edge case. You get some guy in an organization that doesn't qualify. I mean, he somehow made it.
Shouldn't be there, really.
Definitely shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
And he's sitting there not knowing how to do import random into his Python script. And there's some other guy that's got his random number generator up in 2 hours. And it's
Right.
the unqualified versus the guy that's done this a million times. They both exist, but are you going to have both of them working in the same organization? Typically, the 10X
So there's kind of an edge case element to this 50 to 1. And by the way, I want to say also, there exists an infinite ratio as well, right? Which is, there's this guy, he's going to do this thing in one day, and then you, or somebody else, are never, ever going to figure that out. That exists, right? So we know that that does. And we're kind of get to a little bit of why this is important. Whether the numbers are precisely accurate or not, talk about a little bit why it's important.
I mean, those numbers look impressive, but I would ask, like, 50 to 1 what? Is that lines of code? Is that
Right.
projects finished? Like we mentioned, like a lot of that can just be familiarity with a given project or code base.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And that kind of strikes at the heart of the specific nuance about how you study that empirically. What does it look like? And I know a lot about that, and we're just kind of, for now, and the point is totally well taken. For now, we're kind of just hand waving it. Let's bring it back down. What about 10 to 1? Does that seem a little more reasonable? To say you've seen 10 to 1 in the same organization, or 10 to 1 even on the same team. You ever seen that? 10 to 1, two people sitting next to each other in two, contiguous cubes, for example. Okay, so I think we kind of see it feels right, and the data tends to back this up. All right, and I want you to ponder this one. What does it mean? What does it imply in practice? Now, this is also what I want you to think about. They've done the same kinds of studies across organizations. When you look at comparable organizations, let's say 200 developers in this company, and across the street is another company with 200 developers, and this company outperforms that company. Again, probably more of an edge case in the sense of it's the extreme, right, end here. But what does that mean? 4 to 1, from the perspective of several hundred developers, means that this company can produce and develop in a day when it'll take this company 4 days to produce. Do you believe that kind of difference exists between software companies? Okay, the burning question right now, if we can talk about for just a couple minutes, we'll come back to it next week where I presumably will get through all of the rest of this lecture, but what does that make you do as a developer? What does that suggest to you if you're in charge of R&D? What does that mean? And why is it that you've got 50 to 1 or even 10 to 1 or 20 to 1 over here on individuals, but by the time you amplify that to a couple hundred people, it sort of dampens out. 4 to 1 is still big, but it's much more dampened from 50 to 1, right? There's a handful of things. So the one I want you to think about is why this difference. Well, let's talk about that first. And then secondarily, as a manager, how does understanding that change how you manage? How you think about your people, or how you approach hiring, or how you approach everything. I think there's an incredible amount of stuff that hinges right here on this slide, and I think it's vast. Why the damping function? Why 50 to 1 goes to 4 to 1 once you get a couple hundred people? I'm going to go this way, and we'll go lightning round, do the quick thought, and we'll keep scanning that way.
Well, it's like the bell curve. You're going to have people that, crowd towards the middle and people on the edges. And the more people you get, the more it's going to reflect the average.
Okay, so what you're saying is the more of the best people you get, probably the more likelihood you've got to be up here more toward the 4 than the 1. Is that fair?
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying the more mass you get, the more you're going to be towards just kind of the average developers.
Okay, keep going. And then I'll come back.
I think as you organize them into strengths and weaknesses, you can each tackle something at a different pace, and you can collectively do more.
I like that. So that relates a little bit to the kind of the amateur psychologist thing. I think a really great manager understands the dynamic fit of team members and how they blend and how they complement each other. If you do that right, you can actually accentuate. Even though if you try to treat them all like a pound of sausage, they're not all the same, they don't act the same, they don't respond the same. How do you make assignments and fit people together in a way that takes advantage of those differences? I'm not a believer, by the way, that differences by themselves have any intrinsic value per se. Does that make sense? I don't really care what the ethnic breakdown of my team is, or the gender breakdown of my team. What I care about, but I do care deeply that I understand what the personalities are of all the members of my team and how they are blending together. And some of that might be cultural, and some of that might be gender. But I'm saying fundamentally, differences by themselves aren't some magic panacea, but understanding that personalities are different, and then how do you blend those? How do you bring them together is an art form, and it's really, really huge when you pull it off.
I think going along with that, you can always fit different like strengths and weaknesses into like the different roles as in like not everybody's gonna be as good at one part of programming
That's right.
as they are other parts of programming.
So can you complement that? Can you bring stuff?
Maybe better at typing out the program once they already understand what it's doing. Another might be better at the underlying idea of like the algorithm and wouldn't necessarily be as quick at
Right.
typing out that algorithm.
Yeah, absolutely.
It seems like if you had multiple people on the same team that were almost 50 in for individually working together, as soon as you put them on the same code base, they all have their own very individual specific way that they would do it efficiently by themselves. Now it will like clash sometimes,
Yeah.
and they may each turn into a 4 instead of a 50.
Yeah, 3 alpha dogs in the same pound, it's probably not gonna end well, right? One will survive and become the leader. These are some interesting dynamics when you get, how many prima donnas can you get on one team and survive? A great manager, by the way, can bring a lot of that kind of talent and somehow cause them to be productive within that environment and assuage the alpha dog problem, okay, which is a real thing. Yeah.
Well, I think one of the things that would give you a 50-to-1 for individuals and a 4-to-1 across organizations is that programmers are not statically productive. You'll have valleys and you'll have little mountains of productivity.
That's right.
So if you catch one of your worst guys at his valley while one of the best guys on a mountain right now, you can get 50-to-1 easily, but when you average that across 200, you're going to get a much
Right.
decreased difference.
And that deals a lot with project management, right? Someone's got downtime. How do you keep people busy? As projects kind of rise and fall, people are jumping off that project onto the next one. There's this natural disruption as well that shows up, that you need to keep people in an optimal state.
And just with the nature of this, of developing, even the 50-to-1 person is eventually going to run into a problem that sums them for a few days.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me see, I wanna go this way, so go first.
So just clarification, when it says for entire organizations, does that mean comparing two organizations or just the range within of the developers within one organization?
That's comparing two organizations, one organization against another one. So one company with a couple hundred devs and another company with a couple hundred
So
devs.
it kind of looks like the clustering of similar talents.
Could be the clustering of similar talent that causes it to rise, right, to be a little higher. Although what's interesting is clustering the 50-to-1 doesn't produce a company that's 50-to-1. Google's not, I don't know if the average Google dev is 10 times more productive than the average Qualtrics, I don't know, Nike, what are the other logos here? Exactware, I'm just picking random logo. I'm not picking on anybody, BYU. I'm just saying. But if they were all 10-to-1, Google would not be 10 times as an organization. It falls. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Part of that might be that, if I'm programming by myself, I'm not part of a team or an organization, I don't have anyone I can go to for help. But if I'm in a group with other people that I know I can trust, I can be like, hey, how do I solve this? Or I'm having this problem. And just look at my code, make sure I'm not failing a sanity check somewhere.
Okay, good.
And part of it is just the slowdowns and the handicaps that come from joining these things together, because it's like, and I think that in the conceivable, the theoretical of having 24 alphas of these ones that can be 50-to-1 against, like, even if they're 50-to-1 against first-year students, that's still going to be impressive.
Right.
But if you get a couple dozen of them, you could and you can manage them well, you might be able to break the 4-to-1, but I doubt it would be by that much, because just the idea of teamwork versus individual work is a different beast.
It is a different beast. And I want to just say two things and then we'll stop. One is parallelizability. I don't know if that's an actual word in our language, but it should be if it's not. What I mean by that is, and Brooks talks about this, okay? It's part of the Mythical Man Month, and it's the essence of the concept of the Mythical Man Month. He says that parallelizability when you're picking cotton is not that hard to accomplish, all right? I used to, as a kid, weed soybean fields in Iowa. Okay? It's not that hard to do with a bunch of 13-year-olds. Give one an instruction. You walk down this row, you pull weeds that you see, don't pull soybeans. And then you give that to 20 people, they spread across 20 rows, and you pick them up a half a mile later at the other end of the row. This is not that hard. When you're building software, nothing remotely like that exists for software. So the notion of so what that means is you're constantly stopping because of dependencies, right? You're going and you have to stop because you have to wait for this other person to get the other thing done, and they gotta do one thing. I'm sitting here waiting, my board just fried, I don't have the tools I need, I'm waiting on the company to rev the chip, whatever it happens to be, and I'm waiting all the time, right? The parallelizability becomes really, really difficult. The other one is communication, right? We talked a little bit about it. 200 people have to get on the same page. How do you do that without everybody spending every hour of every day talking in order to try to make sure everybody knows what everybody else knows, right? You can do that, but you're not going to write much code. And if everybody just takes off writing code, is that going to be a problem?
Oh.
Yes, it'll be a big problem because you don't know what you're building or how it blends. And there's a middle ground where you've got to have a certain amount of communication. That's a damping factor. It's a little bit like trying to run a Ferrari through the speed bumps in a grocery parking lot, right? Yeah, you can hit 150 miles an hour between the speed bumps, then you got to come to a dead stop, right? So that stopping to communicate, I don't care how fast your car is, you can only drive so fast through the parking lot because there's a bunch of speed bumps. And the speed bumps, like you said, it's a different beast. The speed bumps are part of why that speed bumps are communication. You've got to stop to get everyone on the same page. Okay, well, everybody remember what this one is. Programmer variability, we'll come back to this. We're like, I don't even know where we are. 6 of 24, piece of cake. Okay, so we've got team time right now to your